Gabriel and the Guardians is an indie animated series over on Angel Studios, focusing on the story of the angel Gabriel as he attempts to help the ancient world after it has fallen into darkness. We'll be discussing the first episode and the real-life biblical and extra-biblical inspirations, but of course I'd like to address first the idea that the show is controversial. Now, the claim that the show is controversial seems to come from the rumor that it was somehow associated with the Daily Wire. After doing some research online, this doesn't seem to be true, but there are some rumors that someone was involved in the production at some point with the Daily Wire as well as the show. This doesn't appear to actually be true, and instead, Angel Studios had a different production that was somewhat associated with the Daily Wire, but even then, there was some internal distancing from the Daily Wire when that happened. Gabriel and the Guardians instead is created by Jason Moody and also stars the voice talents of Johnny Young Bosch as Gabriel himself, as well as Christina V, known previously for characters like Miraculous Ladybug and Veroska from Helluva Boss. So if you like indie animation, angelic lore, and some of these voice actors, you should definitely check it out, as it's a shame that this cartoon has gotten so much negative association, despite not actually being attached to Ben Shapiro or his company. Now, as the title suggests, the story starts with Gabriel in something of a heavenly place called the Garden of Paradim, a clear reference to the biblical Garden of Eden, which is Hebrew for paradise. This story isn't exactly as it appears in the Bible, however, and instead, it shows us a world that feels more like an elvish fantasy land than our own Earth before the flood. I found it interesting that other commentators took issue with this, as each story in the Bible is its own unique symbolism used to continue the same basic story, with characters jumping from one symbolic extreme to another from one chapter to the next. The later Apocrypha that came after the Bible continued this tradition, telling the same stories in different ways, with figures that had become popular with the common folk at the time, which in the time of the Second Temple period was the fallen angels, from which we get the expanded stories of the world before the flood, including the story of the Watchers and the Nephilim, something the show will definitely be diving into. While there is huge importance to preserving the original myths such as those found in the Bible, later editions like the Book of Enoch are important because they add details held on by the Jewish tradition that the original writers of the Bible would have expected you to already know. With myth also just being real-life history coded in metaphor, these later stories also get to fill in the gaps of what's missing with cross-comparison to the other myths found in the world culture that seem to be talking about the same stories. After all, even if you believe the Bible is divinely inspired, as I do, the point of it was not to create a complete history of every single facet in the world, as if somehow nothing could ever have happened outside of what is directly mentioned in the Bible. Instead, it's a series of summaries as metaphorical fables in order to convey as much of the world history as possible to modern humans. What the show Gabriel and the Guardians provides then is the same key details to the original stories, presented in forms that younger teen audiences are more likely to consume. Not as a replacement for the Bible, but as a way to help people get more into it, by decoding the original language of metaphor into the more modern one that they understand. In Gabriel and the Guardians, Gabriel is something of a lower level angel, alone in the Garden of Paradim, away from the group of Watchers that he makes clear serve a more important role in heaven's hierarchy. When visited by the High Angel Dionel, Gabriel is hinted at having some sort of failure in the past that led him to become the gardener here. Not a position of shame, but one that makes him feel like he is being left out. The other Watchers, as they are called, are busy with some sort of war, which the Angel Dionel claims is growing so dire that they are asking for Gabriel's help now. Despite acting like he wants to get reassigned, Gabriel claims he can't help in this battle because he needs to tend to the garden, and insists he is not trying to avoid the war. It's clear, however, that something happened and he has had a falling out with the angel Michael in particular, likely being unable to bring himself to help them when they were under some sort of attack before. The Garden of Paradim is explained in the first episode to be a sort of floating light over the earth, in a sky that has elsewise become clouded with darkness so that no stars or sun can shine through. To the people below, this light is a reminder that the world has fallen into chaos, with what little we see of it being a barren world ruled by evil giants, with humans doing their best just to get by. This leads to evil forces creating some sort of giant that is able to get into the Garden of Paradim in order to steal one of the eternal seeds, as Gabriel calls them. This causes Gabriel to jump into battle where he fights the giant but ends up falling into the world below the garden. That ended Gabriel's story in the episode, setting the stage for future episodes where the trailer depicts Gabriel becoming invested in this lower world and deciding to fight to help change it, bringing him back to the battle against the dark forces. Until the attack from this giant, Gabriel apparently had no idea if the mortals in the world below had even survived whatever caused the dark cloud to appear. It was something he was curious about and even seemed to yearned to see, and now that he has fallen from his place in heaven, that's exactly what he's going to get. Now, the world below Paradigm is more fantasy themed than we imagined 6,000 years ago, but the story is ultimately a very strong parallel to what we know about the time before the flood in the biblical and extra-biblical tradition. According to the trailer, these aren't just any giants, for instance, but specifically, these are the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible. According to the book of Genesis chapter 6, the Nephilim are a group that existed before the flood and also afterwards. These were giants who were said to be the children of the sons of God who took human wives. According to the brief mention in the Bible, these were the mighty men of old and renown. They are presented as mostly dying out because of the flood. However, as that verse said, they did exist afterwards. Much later, after the Israelites returned from Egypt, for instance, the 12 tribes returned to the land of Canaan to find that the local people there had been conquered by giants known as Anakim, specifically said to be the descendants of the Nephilim, and being so big that the Israelites felt like they were grasshoppers in comparison. Due to how little focus these Nephilim get in the book of Genesis, the later book of Enoch was written in order to elaborate on that story and the tradition surrounding the fallen angels. Here, the Nephilim are described as not just being giants, but horrendous ones that eat all of the food in their land and then turn to eat the smaller humans. Before the mention of the Nephilim, however, the Bible mentions a long period of time, about 1,600 years, where humans grew from their humble origins, starting with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve have not been mentioned yet in the show, but it seems obvious that this Garden of Paradigm was the Garden of Eden that they were expelled from. In other biblical stories, this was done because of the temptations of the evil serpent, who in later traditions, both Jewish and Christian, became associated with Satan or the devil, the leader of the fallen angels. In Judaism, for instance, there are texts like the Zohar, which claim that the leader of the fallen angels, Samael, rode upon the serpent to enter Eden and tempt Adam and Eve. In the show, the good angels are clearly at war with dark forces, likely their own dark counterparts from within their hierarchy. Other angels who have begun to corrupt the different worlds that Dionel mentions walking through as a cosmic celestial being, with the Earth likely just being one of the many battlefields against their own rebellious brothers. After the expulsion of Adam and Eve, sin continues primarily through the line of Cain, their firstborn son. Their second son Abel was born more righteous, but Cain kills Abel out of jealousy and sets the pattern for sinfulness in his line until the time of the flood. Abel, meanwhile, is replaced by Adam's third son Seth, who goes on to have a more righteous line as the world before the flood becomes more corrupt. With Noah being the only one righteous enough to save, the implication in the Bible is that the line of Cain had become so corrupt that they had to be wiped out, much like the Nephilim. In the show, we seem to be at the time before the Great Flood, as the most dominant kingdom, according to the advertisements for the show, is Cainara, spelled similarly to Cain in the original Hebrew, which was Cain. This would make the descendants of Cain in the show the dominant kingdom in the world, just like in the Bible. The key character we meet from this kingdom is an alchemist named Nehemiah, which sounds pretty close to the last descendant in the line of Cain mentioned in the Bible, Nama, meaning pleasant. In the show, Nehemiah is seen trying to summon a giant, thinking that it is a god, one who can perhaps help her people. The line of Cain, because of its sinfulness, is generally associated with the worship of giants and the fallen angels, the false gods who led the world astray. Like the angels, they were said to worship themselves, creating giant statues of themselves in order to revere their own images as greater than they were. In later traditions like the Zohar, the line of Cain is equated directly with the Nephilim, with the serpent tempting Adam and Eve with the forbidden fruit of knowledge, being equated with the sons of God seducing their human wives and giving them forbidden magics in the book of Enoch. It's because of this the Zohar says that Samael, while riding the serpent, actually impregnated Eve, making Cain the first descendant of the sons of God and the father of all of the Nephilim. In Gabriel and the Guardians, they seem to be sticking more to the literal interpretations from the Bible instead of the Apocrypha and other later traditions, presenting the Cainara as perhaps not in the right, but also not entirely evil. Humans who have been misled by the angels and the giants instead of being the angels and giants themselves. Though the exact nature between this kingdom and the giants will likely be more complex than what we've seen from episode 1. We also meet the character named Nock, another mortal on the surface, but one who is actively fighting against the giants and sees it as his great mission, indicating he's not from Cainara and in fact a different group of people who are against the giants instead of worshipping them. In the past, the giants were said to have conquered most of the known world, but the ones who stood against them would have been the ones from the righteous line of Seth, particularly Enoch and his descendants. While the original Enoch is a few generations older than the Noah that would have existed at the time of the flood, I like to imagine that this Nock character is an attempt to combine Enoch and Noah. Enoch is known for being taken up to heaven instead of dying a natural death and replacing the fallen angels that were supposed to rule over humans from there, paving the way for his great-grandson Noah to survive the flood while all of the others died. It would be interesting to combine these ideas for me because in some traditions like the Genesis Rabbah commentary, Noah's wife is actually the Nama from the line of Cain, hence why both lines are given genealogies before the flood, as they are the two lines that led to all modern humans. And already, despite the tension between them, I feel like Noach and Nehemiah could end up coming together in this same way, perhaps being the two humans that will survive the flood and continue humanity into the new world. The big mystery of the show, of course, will be the nature of the celestial seeds in the Garden of Paradis that the giants are after for some reason. They're obviously a cosmic source of power, and the constant cross imagery tells us that this is all about the preparation of the coming of Christ. But it will be fun to see how exactly the power of these seeds work in the show and how the villains try to exploit them. We may cover this show some more as new episodes come out, so don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Or if you need to check out episode 1, consider signing up on Angel Studios. This is indie animation funding in a very direct way and something more people should do to support the kinds of shows they want to see in the world. So consider giving it a try with the link in the pinned comment down below. And if you want more fallen angel lore, consider signing up for our Patreon or Cartoon Universe memberships, where you get early access to our mythological deep dives. Right now we have a video up about the angel Metatron and how he might relate to Hazbin Hotel in the greater Helluverse. And tonight we'll be putting out a video about Gravity Falls that's 35 minutes long, talking about the ultimate fallen angel, Bill Cipher. Links in the pinned comment down below. See you guys there. Man, I do love running, especially when it's away from women who are madly in love with me. But one thing I never run from is another man. Well, 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 if it isn't my arch rival, Racer Rabbit. Shady the Bat, you're here for the magic crystal as well?